Hello and welcome and a very good evening. You're watching Blueprint Explosive Exclusive with me, Siddhartha Talya. Our big story for today, well, actor Salman Khan is back with a bang, and this time he's taking us straight to the icy heights of Ladakh. The teaser of his upcoming movie, The Battle of Galwan, has dropped, paying a raw and real tribute to the heroes of the Galwan clash. Now, with the tagline, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, fans are hailing Salman for that teaser and bringing the real heroes to the big screen, reminding India of the courage, the sacrifice, and the resilience of our soldiers. Now, before we get into the details of that particular teaser and what it depicts, now, while fans in India are celebrating this particular teaser, Beijing appears to be visibly rattled. Chinese state media has now decided to describe the movie as over the top, claiming that it contradicts facts on the ground and that it is inappropriate in its theme as well as timing. The cinematic retelling has sparked a debate now between real and real, as the film highlights the Galwan clash, a violent confrontation on the Western Himalayas where soldiers use crude improvised weapons like nail-studded iron rods and clubs wrapped in barbed wire and stones owing to a long-standing agreement between India and China. And it is in this clash that 20 Indian soldiers made the ultimate sacrifice while defending the country and its territory. And there are reports, of course, that have suggested that China lost almost twice the number of troops, 38 according to some estimates. Now, from territorial disputes along the line of actual control to visa issues as well as naming rows, from China's strategic pressure in the Indian Ocean to India's counter-moves as well as water disputes over the Brahmaputra dams, and China's attempts to block India on the global diplomacy front, the standoff between the two countries has been a test of resolve. Now, yet, as the film reminds us, the history remains complex. Bollywood has stepped in to honor the bravery of India's brave hearts. Tonight, we take you through the timeline of the clash and also as to why the Chinese might be rattled by what is a 1 minute 10-second long teaser. Because when history meets cinema, the impact is felt far beyond the big screen. Let's also first begin by giving you a timeline of the Galwan clash. In April 2020, which is more than 5 years ago, China decided to build up its troops in eastern Ladakh. The next month, in May 2020, China decided to block Indian patrols in the Galwan area. In mid-May 2020, China attempted further transgressions near the line of actual control. India said very categorically that any change in the status quo on the part of China would be unacceptable. On the 6th of June 2020, both sides agreed to disengage and not provoke each other. In fact, this was also echoed in the statement of the Defence Minister of India, Rajnath Singh, later in Parliament as well. But on the 15th of June 2020, Chinese troops violated that agreement and there was a violent clash that ensued in the Galwan Valley. 20 Indian soldiers were killed and at least 38 Chinese soldiers lost their lives. Now that we've given you a perspective on what actually transpired in Galwan, let's also give you how the Chinese are reacting to this particular teaser of the Battle of Galwan. Now, this particular article, which is 1,111 words, has been published in Global Times, widely seen as a mouthpiece of the ruling dispensation in China. Now, that particular article says that this particular teaser is over the top and that it contradicts facts. They've also said that cinematic exaggeration cannot rewrite history and nothing can shake the PLA's determination. The portrayal of events does not align with facts, and when history falls short, Bollywood steps in, and the film's theme, and this is important, and the timing is inappropriate. It also adds by saying that a film cannot affect a nation's sacred territory, quote unquote. Now, in this particular article, it's relied on several experts to make these comments. Let's also give you several contentious issues now brewing between India and China for a very long time. There are territorial disputes, of course. China also lays claim over Aksai Chin as well as the state of Arunachal Pradesh. India has countered this. It's defended its sovereignty and integrity and has thwarted attempts at salami slicing on the part of China. There are visa as well as naming rows. China has issued staple visas to athletes from Arunachal Pradesh. It's also decided to rename locations in Arunachal Pradesh on its maps. Now, the Indian action has been strong. The Ministry of External Affairs has objected to this, and it has rejected staple visas. There's also strategic pressure that is being mounted on the part of China on multiple fronts, but India has been alive to this and has countered this quite successfully. China has, of course, been also talking about the CPEC and the BRI and the string of pearls around the Indian Ocean. India has taken several steps to counter Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region. In fact, also extending a very significant line of credit to Sri Lanka, where China has in fact had access vis-a-vis ports in the past. As far as water and resources are concerned, there are multiple disputes between the two countries on that. China has been building massive dams on the Brahmaputra. India has also responded by boosting its own river infrastructure on its side of the border. As far as global diplomacy is concerned, China has repeatedly shielded terrorists based out of Pakistan, including at the United Nations. However, India has managed to exercise a significant amount of diplomatic leverage to ensure that China does in fact bend to India's will, including, of course, the eventual ban on Masood Azhar of the Jaish-e-Mohammed by the United Nations Security Council. Now, let's take this across to our guests. Professor Madhav Nalapat, geopolitical expert, joins us, as does Pathikrit Pine, geopolitical analyst. Professor Nalapat, coming to you first and foremost, I'm sure you've gone through the article that's been published in the Global Times. It's 1,111 words in response to what is a 70-second teaser of an upcoming Indian film about what transpired at Galwan. And if you go through the piece exhaustively, you'll actually notice how the Global Times article also reproduces the official Chinese version of events, including a statement by one of its senior generals about what transpired in Galwan according to, of course, their point of view. Why would China devote so much time and attention to a 70-second teaser of an Indian film, sir?
Look, the fact of the matter is the Chinese have violated every single agreement they have entered into, without exception. Every agreement. And as far as the Galwan clash is concerned, memories are still fresh. A Chinese patrol crossed a river, transgressed on the Indian side of the line of actual control, and they were challenged by an Indian battalion. And the commanding officer said very politely, the Chinese CEO, that, look, this is our territory, please leave. At that, the Chinese commanding officer got very angry and pushed our commanding officer off a cliff, where unfortunately he fell to his death. When they saw that their CEO had been killed by the Chinese, our soldiers did what Indian soldiers do during such a situation. They basically ensure that retributive justice is done. Now, the Chinese had come prepared for a battle. At that time, there was no question of loading any ammunition by either side. So the Chinese came with long spears, they came with long knives, and the Indian soldiers only had their guns with them, their rifles with them. But when they saw the CEO meet his doom at the hands of Chinese, our soldiers immediately put bayonets on their guns and then went at the Chinese soldiers. And I can tell you, they made short work of them. There's no question about it. It's Global Times that writing fiction. It's an act of extreme heroism on the part of our soldiers who refused to flinch, even in the face of these spears and daggers and well-prepared attack. They immediately fixed their bayonets and went at the Chinese soldiers. And I can say they gave a very good account of themselves. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Pine, now, what was interesting about that Global Times article is the fact that it also emphasizes the timing of the release of this particular teaser. Now, the Chinese presumably are upset about this because they believe that given the fact that India has been at the receiving end of very heavy tariffs on the part of the Americans, there's perhaps a recalibration in terms of its ties vis-a-vis China, that we're moving towards greater economic cooperation. And therefore, this kind of a teaser around this particular time when the two countries are perhaps re-strategizing the future course ahead in terms of their own ties. This is bad timing. That appears to be their perspective. How would you respond to the kind of response that's coming from China?
Well, India's foreign policy does not pivot around Bollywood movies.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a teaser that is coming out, not even a trailer. We don't even know what the movie will be all about, but invariably it is about martyred Colonel Babu. And I think India has absolute right to make a movie on that. See, so far as India's foreign policy is concerned, we actually have steadfastly, defended our strategic autonomy. Even if there is a trade deal with the Americans, it will be purely on understanding the terms on both sides. There is no question of being subservient to the West, and I think the Chinese know it better. In fact, a lot of effort has been made by government of India as well, in spite of challenges which we faced during Galwan and the transgressions and the issues of salami slicing. Efforts have been made to improve ties. India Prime Minister went to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO summit in China, and I think the Chinese must appreciate that. See, it is just a movie, but I think if we may call it the Dhurandhar effect. Why I call it the Dhurandhar effect is because the way Dhurandhar movie actually exposed the Karachi project and what was actually happening within Pakistan to orchestrate violence and terror attack in India. I think the movie actually will, in a manner, defy many of the things which China has claimed during this event. For example, India being a transparent democratic country, we were very, very categorical in terms of the casualties that happened on the Indian side. However, from the Chinese side, it is pretty clear that they underreported their casualties. They had always mentioned that the casualties were only 4 or 5, but in reality, the casualties were something around 40 to 45, as the satellite imagery of some of the Western countries suggested. So I think they are a little jittery about the narrative that has been set by Beijing being countered or challenged and something else coming up and showing the reality of what happened in China. In fact, many of these countries where you have a one-party rule, it actually works on a lot of control of narrative and information. I think somewhere this movie and what it will show will break that, and they may not want the Chinese people to know what actually has happened. There are reports about unmarked graves of Chinese soldiers who died in Galwan, in a particular place in China, unmarked, mark that. So I think those things, in terms of what happened here, would be revealed. Perhaps that's the reason they are a little jittery. But at the same time, if they try to think that there is a huge super foreign policy conspiracy of India behind it, I think they are, climbing up the wrong tree. Sometimes, most of the time, India doesn't even bother about Bollywood movies, except when a movie like a Dhurandhar comes out.
Yes, Professor Nalapad, if we are to assume that we're also, of course, in the middle of an information war, I believe there should be more content vis-a-vis China that Bollywood should churn out, if at all it is part of that information war. I can think of the film that came out in 1964 called Hakikat, based on the 1962 war between India and China. Then, of course, Farhan Akhtar very recently has also come out with a film about the Battle of Rizangla. And now we see Salman Khan coming out with this film about the Galwan clash. Perhaps there should be more content of this nature.
Absolutely. No. There is no...
Professor Nalapad, I'll come back to you, Mr. Pine, but Professor Nalapad, yes. Professor Nalapad, if you can hear me?
Look, the fact of the matter is, the Indian soldier is man to man, or should I say person to person. Our lady soldiers are as good. When the Chinese soldier is 2020 is not 1962, where very, very bad leadership, and even at the military level, at the command level, and unfortunately at the political direction level, led to a disastrous situation. The situation now is very different. We are well armed, we are well equipped, and now we have a good system of roads, etc. The Chinese don't like that. They build extensively on their side of the line of actual control, and they object to our building even a small bicycle path on our side of the line of control. The reason is they cannot fight except a one-sided battle. They cannot fight the Indian soldier.
Yes.
They cannot, and they know it. The Indian soldier has been tested in combat, and
100%.
let me say today's Chinese soldier has not been tested in combat since 1979.
Absolutely.
And, that was the Vietnam War.
Absolutely. Mr. Pine, I'll come back to you now. You were talking about the Dhurandhar effect, and I also, of course, made a question. I asked you a question about the information war, and more power to Bollywood and the Hindi film industry if it's going to come out with movies like this.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Many more such movies on issues, concerning national security and the valor of our soldiers, both the ones in uniform and those who work without the uniform, that should come out. I think Bollywood have had enough of, one lad and one lady running around the trees for love stories. We had seen those for decades. I think it's time that Bollywood comes out with some more mature stuff. We are seeing these movies coming up. And let me say one thing, when you actually project genuine real-time characters who died fighting for the country, India as a country never allows any kind of exaggeration.
Yes.
So this particular movie, I'm sure, will show what actually happened.
Okay.
Which means they will show the valor. If the Chinese are jittery, they are jittery not because anything, exaggeration will happen, but because the reality will be shown where, for the first time, if you see the salami slicing strategy or creeping acquisition strategy of China, they always go in a particular country, take a little bit of land, and never turn back.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Mr. Pine, and also thank you, Professor Nalapat, for this. We're short of time, but I don't really mind even if our filmmakers take slight liberties with facts. After all, who are the Chinese to be lecturing us about propaganda and sensationalism? They're, after all, an authoritarian state who indulged in this far more than any other country has, perhaps. So many thanks, Mr. Pine, as well as Professor Nalapat, for your perspective on this. We'll slip into a short break. We'll come back with more on the other side.